Mr. True Nightmares, Episode 31. Like every child, he was afraid of the creatures hiding in the cupboard and the monsters under the bed. For this reason, he never closed his door and listened to the tales told by his mother or father every night until he fell asleep. One day, he told his father that he was sleepy, and they went to the child's room together. While the boy was putting on his pajamas, his father ran to the ringing telephone, but there was only static coming from the receiver. Thinking that something was wrong with the lines, the father went back to his son and saw that he was already in bed. He said, "Come on, let's check if there's a monster under your bed." But when he bent down, he froze in his tracks because there was his son under the bed, wrapped tightly in his pajamas, and he was whispering in fear, "Dad, there's someone on my bed." The father got over the shock of the moment and collapsed next to his son, where he asked anxiously. His son, with a trembling voice, pointed to the top of his bed with great fear in his eyes. The father, feeling his heart beating rapidly, slowly looked over the bed. However, nothing was visible on the bed. The father smiled to calm his son's anxiety and said, "My dear, there's nothing here. You're just imagining it." His son insisted, "Now there really is. It is standing over me, looking at me," he whispered. When the father looked into his son's eyes, at that moment he thought that his son's fear was real. "I believe you. I won't let it do anything to you," he said in a determined voice, gently putting his hand on his son's head. Suddenly the lights in the room suddenly went out. The father shattered inside because he felt that something was close by. The silence was filled with the sound of slow breathing. The father recognized the silhouette in the darkness, its eyes glowing. "Dad, it's here," his son shouted, and fright the father's heart raced, but he acted with a determination filled with courage to protect his son. Slowly he took out his mobile phone from his pocket and illuminated the room with its light. When he turned the light in the direction from which the glowing eyes came, the dark figure that filled the room appeared. The frightening side of the creature created terror, and the father, however, the light in the father's hand drove the creature back, and it disappeared. When he switched on the lights again, he saw that it was only the father and his son in the room. The son hugged his father and said, "Thank you, Dad. I feel like I'm gone because of you." The father, smiling, hugged his son tightly and said, "I am always with you, dear." From that day on, the bond between father and son grew stronger. The father's courage showed that he was always there to calm his son's fears. Together they learnt to cope with the experience of that dark night, and it brought them closer together. The father stood in the center of the room, ready to protect his child. The dark figure revealed by the light had mysteriously disappeared, but the father's moment of comfort was temporary. The room was suddenly filled with an icy cold, and the lights began to flicker. Shadows left from the walls and began to draw a series of strange symbols. The room was suddenly filled with a silent scream, and the furniture shifted rapidly. The father's mobile phone made a strange noise and switched itself off. The father realized that the room was becoming more and more strange with each passing second. Suddenly, a faint beam of light appeared at one end of the room, accompanied by the figures of a series of ghosts. These ghosts looked like forgotten creatures of the past. As the father's heart raced, the ghosts began to wander around the room. One ghost whispered in the father's ear, "You must save her, or she will stay here forever." The father was confused because there was no one to save, nor why these mysterious events are happening. At that moment, his son suddenly began speaking. "Confusion, father. They want you here. They're telling me something, but I don't understand," he said in a desperate voice. The father's inner resolve was strengthened by his desire to protect his son. The ghost offered the father a kind of mysterious guidance, presenting him with an old book and a roll containing strange symbols. These objects, which appeared in the father's hand, represented an explanation of events and perhaps a way out. With the old book and symbols in his hands, the father, guided by the ghosts, endeavored to save his son. However, the mysterious events in the room became more complicated. While the ghosts were showing the father a way to save his child, they were also making him feel the power of the beings hunting the child. The book in the father's hand contained information about the ability of the beings haunting his son to control and manipulate us who had lived in the past. With the father's efforts, however, his son suddenly ground in pain. The father rushed to his son in alarm and panic. His son was helplessly groaning under the tyranny of the entities. Seeing the girl circling around the boy, tormenting him, the father decided to complete the ritual without wasting any more time. Just then, however, the faint beam of light in the center of the room grew stronger. This figure, which seemed to be the leader of the beings, looked at the father in a strong and threatening manner. The father realized that this dark figure was trying to use his child to achieve his own goals. The father stood against the dark figure in a rage, filled with a desire to protect his child. However, the figure swung at the father with a mysterious force, throwing him into a corner of the room. As the father writhed on the floor in agony, the dark figure mysteriously disappeared. The son ran to his father and took him in his arms. As the father breathed his last breath, he said to his son, "I love you. I will always be with you." After these words, the father's eyes closed, and the ghost in the room took his soul and disappeared. Silence fell over the room again, but this time a silence full of sadness and loss. The son stood there, devastated by his father's death. At that moment, he realized that his father had sacrificed his own life to protect him. The father's courage and sacrifice could not stop the cruelty of the beings that haunted his son, but his love and protection would remain forever.